Well, perhaps I could just turn to Dr. Brass. I mean, we've just heard how great the PCSK9 inhibitors are from Dr. Navar and Dr. Budoff. The side effects really are rather minimal, but cost has, of course, been the elephant in the room. If it weren't for that, I think the drugs would be in much more widespread use. And how do you factor that in, or how should we factor that in?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bob. That's such an important point here. So the historical context is that the PCSK9 inhibitors, as we know, the first one was approved in July of 2015 at an annual wholesale cost of about $15,000 per year. And since then, due to low uptake and cost effectiveness analyses, which showed at that price point that the value of PCSK9 inhibitors was much lower than what we would commonly expect for high-value therapies. And as a result, in 2018, the two manufacturers, the PCSK9 inhibitors, reduced the prices by 60%, which was an historic reduction down to about $5,000 per year. And even at those prices, in a general secondary prevention population, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the PCSK9 inhibitors are much better value, particularly among those with elevated LDL cholesterol above 100. And quite frankly, Dr. Bott, the data from population-based samples indicate that the uptake of PCSK9 inhibitors thus far is very low. Data out of the PCORNet registry shows that less than 1% of patients with either FH or atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease are using these therapies. And Dr. Navar has led several analyses showing about abandonment rates and copays as barriers to patients who are prescribed these therapies to eventually use them. So rates of primary non-adherence are also high. So in summary, use and uptake of these agents is very low.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame because, you go through the whole process of clinical trial discovery, the work that goes into that by the investigators, of course, the patients themselves contributing as research participants. And then at the end of all of that, you have positive trials that end up having much less impact on clinical practice than would have otherwise been anticipated. But I do think it was a strategic blunder. And I did mention that to people I knew who were working on those programs from the company side in both cases, that, coming out at that price point, $15,000, I mean, it's just going to be a killer. It sort of tainted the whole class. And, the price came down, but by that point, a lot of physicians had tuned out. And, sort of practice patterns were entrenched. It was, I think, a bit of a misstep.
Yeah, and one point to add, Dr. Bott, I think early on, the research led by Dr. Navar really indicated that approval rates were low, but which were a barrier to patients getting the treatment. And some newer data from Dr. Navar that surveyed patients taking PCSK9 inhibitors found that out-of-pocket cost directly to the patient, even if they were approved by their insurer, was the number one barrier to them for PCSK9 inhibitors.
Yeah, no, great point, and great research as well by Dr. Navar, really very useful practical data. Maybe I can turn to Dr. Cannon. What do you think of these issues and how do you deal with them? Because, I mean, if PCSK9 inhibitors were, $1 a day, I think all our patients with atherosclerosis, maybe not all, but a lot of them would be on them. But that's not the case. That's not going to be the case anytime soon. There are other PCSK9 inhibitors that are being developed. They may come in at lower price points, but it's still unlikely that the price will drop dramatically. So for right now, how should we, at a healthcare system, deal with this?
Yeah, no, and I think you bring up a great point. If you look at, and I think you've hit on some of the blunders that were early on in the launch of these products, and if we look at the high costs they came out at, and Dr. Best did a good job pointing out that the manufacturers relaunched these products at a lower list price in 2018. I think one of the things they did, though, and I think it points to many flaws within how we provide pharmacy benefits for the population, we've still got many organizations across the country that, because of contracting strategies and different things, have continued to maintain utilization of those higher list price products. And so the manufacturers lowered the list price, but they left the higher list price products available in the market. And so for us as a health system, we've really focused on, we're gonna prefer those products that have a lower list price, and then we're going to direct them to a single specialty pharmacy. And as part of that, it's really understanding their economics, understanding their benefits, and then how do we make sure that we've taken advantage of all of the copay assistance and other things that are available in the market. Because the reality is, we can, if we couple copay assistance with the patient's benefits, we can literally provide these products at almost a zero cost impact to the patient. And so it's a coordinated effort to make sure we get those patients that are appropriate on therapy. But then once we get them, we can certainly make sure that they get access to the products at almost no cost to themselves.
Yeah, no, those are really key points. And, I think this is a great example of wonderful science, bench to bedside, but then really the issue was implementation science. And I know, Dr. Navarro, you and your colleagues at Duke Clinical Research Institute are thinking a lot about these issues. If we don't get the implementation science right, then, all these great scientific advances, whether basic research, clinical trial research, just end up having much less impact than they otherwise would have.